My name is Evelyn, I'm 70 years old, and I honestly thought the wild chapters of my life were behind me. I'd buried a husband, raised a daughter on my own, survived bad backs, bad knees, and worse presidents. I figured the rest of my story would just be coffee, crossword puzzles, and doctor appointments. Yeah, no doubt life had one more plot twist waiting for me. The day it all blew up actually started nice. We'd just finished a big family reunion at my house. The kitchen still smelled like baked ham and green bean casserole. My grandkids were in the living room, sprawled on the rug, finishing a jigsaw puzzle. My daughter, Nina, was helping them, laughing at some cartoon on TV. For once nobody was fighting. No snarky comments, no weird tension. Just clinking dishes and soft music, and the kind of noisy comfort I used to dream about when I was a young widow working double shifts. My granddaughter had brought one of those old school photo albums. We passed it around the table, pointing at sunburned faces, horrible 80s hair, crooked birthday cakes. We got teary over my late husband's smile. It felt good. Safe. Like maybe my family was finally in a decent place. When everyone drifted into the living room, I stayed behind in the kitchen to clean up and answer a little question that had been nagging at me all week. I sat down at my small kitchen table, set my coffee to the right like I always do, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. Just to check. Just to reassure myself. I hit refresh. The number that popped up on the screen didn't make sense. For a second I thought my glasses were smudged. I took them off, wiped them on my shirt, put them back on, and refreshed again. Still there, $0. My checking, my savings, the small little rainy day stash I'd built up over 10 years, gone. At first my brain just refused to accept it. I felt like the app was playing a prank or the Wi-Fi was glitching. My hands went cold. That weird numb cold that starts in your fingertips and crawls up your arms. That money wasn't just extra, it was my freedom. My don single quotes T-have dash to dash move dash and dash with dash anybody money. The savings that meant I could pay my own bills, fix my own roof, and never have to ask my daughter, "Sweetie, can I stay in your spare room?" And now the screen was telling me I had nothing. "Mom, you okay?" Nina's voice floated in from the living room. I must have looked bad, because when she walked in, the smile dropped right off her face. I couldn't get words out. I just held my phone up with a shaking hand. She leaned in, squinted at the screen, and her jaw did this little twitch it always does when she's annoyed. "What did you do now?" she asked, like I'd accidentally ordered 100 pizzas instead of hitting the wrong button. Before I could answer, Derek chimed in from the couch. "That's my son-in-law. Mid-40s, beer in hand, thinks he's the smartest guy in any room because he once watched a documentary about stocks. He didn't even look over at me. He just snorted and said, 'Relax, Evelyn. We needed it more than you,' just like that. Like he'd borrowed a roll of paper towels, not emptied my entire life savings." The words hit harder than any slap. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" He finally glanced my way, lazy smirk on his face. "Your money. We moved it. You're fine. You don't even spend it. We've got real bills, real problems. You're just sitting on it." My coffee suddenly tasted like metal. The room blurred around the edges. All I could hear, over and over in my head, was, "We needed it more than you." My heart was thudding so loud I could hear it in my ears. It wasn't just the money. It was the audacity. The entitlement. Like everything I'd worked for automatically belonged to them because I was old and didn't he need it. Something inside my chest twisted. Grief, rage, humiliation, all rolled into one. I reached for my purse out of habit. The old version of me wanted to just grab my things, go to my room, maybe cry into my pillow, pretend it would all blow over. That's what I'd done my whole life when people hurt me, shrink, smooth things over, make it easy. But this time, something else woke up. A harder voice. One I hadn't heard in years. I set my purse down. My hands were still shaking, but my voice came out low and steady. Then you're not gonna like what happens next, I said. Derek actually laughed. Okay, sure, Grandma. He raised his beer in the air like he'd just heard a good joke. Nina looked away, cheeks pink, but she didn't say a word. My granddaughter, sensing the tension, started fidgeting with her puzzle pieces. The air in the room went heavy and tight. Before I tell you how wild it got, let me pull you into this with me for a second. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your country or state in the comments. And if you've ever had someone act like they owned your hard-earned money just because you're a family, hit that like button so YouTube knows this story needs to be heard. Okay. Back to my kitchen. The house went dead quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Tick. Tick. Derek's smirk started to falter when he saw I wasn't crying, wasn't arguing, wasn't begging. I just stared at him. Then, out of nowhere, a loud bang rattled the back of the house. Everyone jumped. It sounded like somebody had slammed into the back door. For half a second, I thought a branch had fallen or one of the kids had knocked something over. But then I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps on my porch. Nina's face drained of color. Derek sat up straight, his beer suddenly forgotten. My granddaughter buried her face against her mother's side. The back door opened, and cold afternoon light poured into my kitchen like a spotlight. Two people stepped in. Not neighbors. Not family officers. The first was tall, with graying hair and kind eyes that still looked like they'd seen too much. The second was younger, holding a tablet and a small notebook. Their badges flashed in the light. They moved calm, controlled, like they'd done this dance 100 times. Mrs. Carter, the taller one asked, voice steady. Evelyn Carter, yes, I said automatically, even though my mind was buzzing. I'm Officer Rodriguez, this is Officer Bennett, he said. We got a call from your bank about some suspicious activity. They flagged multiple large transfers from your account. We're here to check on you and take a statement. Do you have a minute? After our family reunion, the temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Derek's little smirk vanished completely. Nina tried to gather herself. Officers, this is all a misunderstanding. My mom gets confused with apps and online stuff. I'm sure she clicked something weird. She gave this nervous laugh, the kind you use when you're trying to redirect a conversation. Officer Rodriguez didn't buy it. He's probably seen that routine way too many times. We'll sort it out, he said calmly. But first, we need to talk to Mrs. Carter, he gestured to the kitchen table. Mind if we sit? I nodded and sat down, still clutching my phone. My legs felt like rubber. Officer Bennett pulled out a chair and sat across from me. When did you notice the problem, Mom? Just now, I said. After the reunion. I opened the app and everything was gone. My savings, my cushion, all of it. He typed into his tablet. Approximately how much are we talking? I told him. It wasn't millionaire money, but it was my money. Years of saying no to vacations, no to new coats, no to takeout. Clipping coupons, waiting for sales, cooking at home, paying things down slow and steady. I'm sure this is just a glitch, Nina cut in. She probably gave her password to one of those scam callers or clicked on a fake email. She's been really forgetful lately. It's honestly been hard to keep up. That last line stung. I am many things. Forgetful is not one of them. Officer Rodriguez looked between us, reading the room like a book. Ma'am, he said to Nina, we're going to need to know who has access to your mother's online banking. Anyone with the password, her security questions, or access to her phone or computer. Anyone, he added, deliberately. The word hung there. Derek shifted on the couch. He shot to his feet suddenly. I'm just gonna grab some water, he muttered, heading toward the sink. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to stay where we can see you, Officer Bennett said, without turning his head. You're part of this household, correct? Derek froze mid-step, then turned back with an ugly little half-smile. Yeah, sure. Whatever you say. I pulled myself together and opened my email, my cloud storage, all the stuff I'd carefully set up over the years. I might be 70, but I'm not clueless. I'd kept digital copies of everything: bank statements, deposit slips, screenshots of balances, a little spreadsheet I'd built myself to track my pension and bills. I handed the phone over. Rodriguez's eyebrows lifted. You're very organized, Mrs. Carter. That's going to help a lot. He scrolled, his expression slowly shifting from neutral to focused. Bennett leaned in to look. They exchanged one of those cop glances that say, "Oh, this is bad." These transfers aren't random, Rodriguez said finally. They're spaced out. Same amounts, same pattern, over the last 6 weeks. 6 weeks, I repeated. I'd had no idea. And your password was changed, Bennett added. Your account alerts were rerouted to a different phone number. That's why you never got notified about the withdrawals. A different phone number, not mine. Rodriguez folded his hands on the table and looked me straight in the eye, voice gentle but serious. Mrs. Carter, this isn't a tech glitch, he said. This is what we call elder financial exploitation. In most cases we see, it isn't strangers on the internet. It's someone close. Someone who knows your routine, your details, your security questions. Someone who knew when you wouldn't be looking. Nina's face crumpled. You're saying somebody stole from my mom? He didn't answer her. He kept his eyes on me. We're going to open a formal case, ma'am. We'll file a report, work with the bank's fraud department, and start an investigation. You did the right thing by checking your account and not brushing this off. Behind him, Derek sat on the couch, stone-faced, jaw clenched, staring at the TV like if he didn't move, nobody would notice him. But his ears were bright red. Officer Bennett slid a card across the table. Here's your case number and our direct contact. Someone from the fraud unit will call you within 24 hours. In the meantime, don't share your passwords with anyone. And if anything weird happens, you call us. Day or night? I nodded, throat tight. Thank you. At the door, Rodriguez paused and looked back at me. Ma'am, he said quietly, what happened to you is not your fault. You were careful. You kept records. You caught it fast. The person who did this knew exactly what they were doing. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. I held his gaze and managed a small, I won't. When they left, closing the door gently behind them, the house didn't feel like my house anymore. It felt smaller, tense. Derek stood up, eyes flashing with anger he was trying to swallow. Nina looked at me like she didn't know whether to hug me or defend him. My granddaughter clung to the puzzle box, confused, sensing everything and understanding nothing. That night, when the house was finally empty and the quiet settled heavy around me, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. This was not some internet scam. This was personal. Someone who knew my passwords, my stories, my routines, had turned me into their private ATM. And as I stared into the dark, one thought rose slowly to the surface, clear as a bell. I'm not letting them get away with this. For the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like a sweet little old lady. I felt like a woman who still had teeth. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that zero on my bank app. It burned behind my eyelids like a neon sign flashing, "You got played." By sunrise, I was done being the sweet old lady everyone underestimated. I made myself a cup of coffee, black, strong, no sugar, and sat at the table planning my next move. First thing I did was call my bank's fraud department again. A woman named Sandra answered, chipper voice, probably didn't expect to deal with an angry grandma before 8 a.m. morning. This is Evelyn Carter, I said, firm. Case number to 7FE09. I need details, all transactions, all access points and every device that logged into my account. Sandra hesitated, then said, yes ma'am. Just a moment, I could hear her typing. The silence stretched. Then she said quietly, "Mrs. Carter, this account was being accessed regularly from your daughter's address. Same IP, same devices, even same time zone." I closed my eyes. So not scammers, no. Ma'am, someone with full authorization. Your credentials were stored on their devices. Translation: they'd stolen from me right in front of my face. When I hung up, my hands weren't shaking anymore. I'd gone past shock and landed squarely in the zone of calm, icy determination. I went through my paper files. I still keep every statement, every receipt. I started marking things in red pen. What was mine, what wasn't, when they'd started dipping their fingers into my money. Every withdrawal told a story. They hadn't done it once or twice. They'd made it a routine. Like it was part of their household budget. And the cherry on top? They used my account to pay off their credit cards. By 10 a.m., I was sitting outside my local police station. Same two officers from yesterday, Rodriguez and Bennett, spotted me the second I walked in. "Mrs. Carter," Rodriguez said, surprise flashing across his face. "You're back already." I smiled politely. "I brought homework." I dropped a fat binder on the counter with a satisfying thud. Inside was every shred of proof, printouts, notes, screenshots, photos of checks. Color-coded and stapled. Rodriguez flipped through it, eyebrows rising. "This is better than half the detective work we see." "Good," I said. "Now let's nail them," he chuckled. "You don't play around, huh?" "Not anymore," I said. They took my statement again, this time official. Then they asked if I'd let them set up a sting. Here's how it went down. They told me not to confront Derek or Nina directly yet. They wanted digital proof. So I played dumb. I texted Nina that afternoon, "Sweetheart, the bank called. They're fixing it. Must have been a glitch. Come by for dinner tomorrow." She replied in under 5 minutes, "Oh, thank God. We were worried, Mom liar." The next day, they came over like nothing had happened, wine bottle in hand, fake smiles plastered on. I acted cheerful like a grandma in a Hallmark movie. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, warm pie, the works. Halfway through dinner, I pretended to get a call. I excused myself to the kitchen, turned on the baby monitor camera I'd hidden above the fridge. Yes, that one from my granddaughter's old nursery, still worked like a charm, and came back. Then I said, "Hey Nina, I think the bank app's acting up again. Can you check something for me on my phone?" Her smile froze. Sure, Mom." I handed it to her. Screen unlocked, banking app open but frozen on the balance page. She took it carefully, like touching a snake, and said, "I don't know, maybe you just need to refresh." Right there in front of me, she went into the settings, changed the alert number back to her own, and opened a new transfer screen. Caught red-handed. What she didn't know was that the camera was recording everything in HD. After they left, I called Rodriguez. He came over with a warrant team before sunrise. By 7 a.m., patrol cars were parked outside my daughter's house. Derek answered the door in pajama pants, holding a coffee mug, completely blindsided. When he saw Rodriguez flash his badge, his jaw literally dropped. "Murdot and Mrs. Langley," Rodriguez said, "we have a warrant to seize electronic devices related to an ongoing fraud investigation." Nina tried to play dumb, stammering, "This is a mistake," but when they confiscated her laptop and Derek's phone, it was game over. That footage from my kitchen sealed the deal. Later that afternoon, Rodriguez called me from the station. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "you'll want to sit down for this." Turns out, my daughter and son-in-law hadn't just taken my money. They'd been rerouting part of my pension every month for nearly a year, setting up automatic transfers using my digital ID. My so-called family had stolen almost $38,000. I sat there in silence, staring at the sunlight on my floor, feeling something crack quietly inside me. Not my heart, that had cracked already. What broke this time was my illusion that blood always meant love. The investigation moved fast. They confessed within a week. Derek took the blame, trying to protect Nina, but both their names were on the transfers. The bank refunded half of it under elder protection laws. But that wasn't what I cared about anymore. What I wanted was peace and control. So when the court offered restitution, I made a deal. They could pay me back slowly, but only under supervised financial probation. I wanted them to feel the same dependency they'd tried to trap me in. And when the judge asked if I wanted to press full charges, I said something that surprised even me. No, Your Honor. I just want them to live long enough to regret it. I sold my house 2 months later, packed what mattered, my photos, my recipes, my coffee mug, and moved to a small condo closer to town. Quiet, sunny mine. Rodriguez and Bennett stopped by one evening to drop off final paperwork. When I thanked them, Rodriguez smiled and said, "Mrs. Carter, most people your age freeze up when this happens." "You fought back," I grinned. "Next time someone calls me a sweet old lady, I'll hand them my case file." A few months later, I got a letter from the DA's office. Apparently, my footage and documentation had become part of a training program for financial crime prevention. They were literally teaching new officers how to spot exploitation using my case. The irony. Derek and Nina had wanted my money to secure their future. Instead, they helped secure mine and countless others. So now, every Thanksgiving, I light one candle at dinner, not for what I lost, but for what I found. My pieced up my backbone. And the reminder that age doesn't make you weak, it just gives you more time to plan revenge properly. If you've ever been betrayed by family, if someone's ever used your kindness as a weakness, remember Evelyn Carter. You can forgive without forgetting, and you can rebuild without apologizing. Because sometimes the quietest people have the loudest comebacks. 3 months after the court ruling, I thought things had settled. The world had gone back to its quiet rhythm: morning coffee, neighborhood walks, the hum of the dishwasher, the occasional check-in from my granddaughter. But peace doesn't always mean silence. Sometimes it means rebuilding with a different kind of fire inside you. I'd spent years being careful, invisible, nice. Now, every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone new, someone who'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. One afternoon, I was at the community center, sipping coffee and listening to a woman named Lorraine talk about how her son had borrowed her car for 2 months and sold it behind her back. She was shaking as she spoke, embarrassed more than angry. The room went still. Every woman there had that same look, shame disguised as politeness. That's when it hit me like a thunderclap. I wasn't the only one. This wasn't just a me problem, this was everywhere. So I started something small. A weekly coffee circle called Straight Talk Tuesdays. It wasn't too fancy. Just 6 of us sitting in a rec room with stale cookies and cheap brew. But what happened in that room changed everything. These women, quiet, polite, church-going types, started sharing stories they'd never told anyone, about daughters forging signatures, grandsons draining accounts, caretakers stealing jewelry. Every story carried the same headline. They thought I wouldn't notice. Word spread. Within a month, we had 40 women showing up, then 100. We weren't victims anymore, we were a force. Rodriguez heard about it through the grapevine and stopped by one day, laughing as he walked in with a box of donuts. "You building a union in here?" he asked. "Better," I said. "A resistance?" He looked around at all those women, tired, fierce, angry, alive. And then he said something that changed the course of everything. "You ever thought about turning this into something official? Like a foundation or nonprofit? We could partner with you." That's how the Carter Circle was born. A few weeks later, I was reading over some forms when I noticed a strange email in my spam folder. "We can help you grow your funds. Exclusive senior investment program." Normally, I'd delete that junk, but the sender looked familiar. Derek Langley Consulting LLC, my son-in-law. Turns out, Derek had decided to start a financial advisory company using money from the restitution payments, and he was marketing it to elderly widows, my women, that was it. He'd poked the wrong bear. I forwarded the email to Rodriguez. He called within the hour. Evelyn. He said, "Are you sitting down?" This guy didn't even try to hide it. He's been cold emailing victims of elder fraud, promising them safe double returns. Classic Ponzi setup. I could hear the disgust in his voice. So we made a plan again. I volunteered as bait. Created a fake email, fake name, Ruth Johnson, 72, recently widowed. I let Derek's assistant set up a Zoom meeting. He joined the call with that same smug smile I used to see across my dinner table. New suit, fake charm, same snake eyes. Ruth. So good to meet you. We help seniors like yourself make their money work harder, not sit idle, he said, voice dripping with salesman grease. I play dumb. Sweet old lady act, giggle and all. Oh, that sounds lovely. But is it safe? Of course, he said. You're talking to a professional. We handle everything, you just relax. And as he talked, the officers were recording the call from the other end. Because guess what? That assistant was Officer Bennett in disguise. 2 weeks later, Rodriguez called me again. "Mrs. Carter," he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. We got him. The feds raided Derek's new office, a rented suite in a strip mall, complete with fake certificates on the wall and 20 laptops logged into stolen identities. He wasn't just running scams. He was buying lists of vulnerable seniors from data brokers and cold calling them with pre-scripted pitches. The total fraud? Nearly $1.2 million. When they arrested him, Derek actually had the nerve to say, "It's not my fault if people are dumb enough to believe me." That line made the evening news. After that, reporters started reaching out to me for comment. Grandmother who caught con man twice. It was ridiculous, but I saw an opportunity. I agreed to one interview, but on my terms. I said, "If you're gonna tell my story, you better tell theirs too." All the women who didn't get their money back. That clip went viral overnight. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. People called me Grandma Vigilante. Someone made a meme of me holding my binder like a sword. Funny thing is, I didn't feel like a vigilante. I felt like someone finally doing the job nobody else wanted to do. Within a year, the Carter Circle had grown into a full-fledged nonprofit with chapters in 12 states. We had lawyers, counselors, even volunteer hackers who tracked fraud rings online. And every meeting started the same way, with one empty chair, for the next woman who'd find the courage to show up. I still got letters from people all over the country. Some heartbroken, some hopeful. But my favorite one came from a woman in Ohio. She wrote, "Because of you, I checked my accounts. Turns out, my nephew had been taking my disability checks. He's facing charges now. You saved me." I sat there reading it, tears falling right onto the paper. Not sad tears. The good kind. The finally kind. One afternoon, Nina showed up at my condo. No Derek, he was doing time. She stood there in jeans and a plain sweatshirt, looking smaller somehow. "I know you don't owe me anything," she said, voice trembling. "But I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't speak for a long time. Then I nodded. "I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix everything." She wiped her eyes. "I want to do better. Can I help with your foundation?" I thought about it. Then I said, "You can volunteer. But you start like everyone else, pouring coffee and setting up chairs." She smiled weakly. "Fair enough. Full circle over 400 women, some with walkers, some with canes, some holding hands." We went around the room sharing what we were thankful for. When it was my turn, I stood up, holding my coffee cup like a microphone. "I'm thankful," I said, "for being underestimated. Because it gave me time to prepare." The whole room erupted in laughter and applause. We ended the night singing old songs, off-key and happy. And as I looked around, I realized this was the family I was meant to have. You can take someone's money, but you can't steal their grit. You can lie to their face, but you can't erase their story. Evelyn Carter didn't just survive betrayal, she turned it into an empire of empowerment. If someone told me 5 years ago that a 70-year-old woman from Georgia would end up on national television, not for baking pies or winning bingo, but for busting financial criminals. I'd have laughed till my dentures rattled. But life's got jokes. And apparently, I'm the punchline that punches back. The national spotlight, it started small. A local news reporter did a feature on the Carter Circle. 2 days later, a producer from Good Morning America called. "Mrs. Carter, America needs to hear your story," she said, all sugar and urgency. "You're inspiring millions of people, inspiring—" I wasn't trying to inspire anybody. I was just trying to make sure no one else got robbed by their own blood. Still, I agreed. Not because I cared about fame, but because exposure meant protection. If people saw me, it'd be harder for the predators to silence me. They flew me to New York, stuck me in a fancy hotel where the towels were folded like swans, and told me, "Just be yourself." I thought, lady, at 70, that's the only person I know how to be. When the cameras rolled, the host leaned in with her perfect teeth and said, "So Evelyn, you turned pain into power. How does it feel to be America's grandma vigilante?" I smiled politely. "It feels like justice finally remembered my number." The studio crowd cheered. That clip hit 12 million views overnight. Suddenly, every talk show, podcast, and newspaper wanted a piece of me. You'd think all that attention would help. And at first, it did. Donations to the Carter Circle skyrocketed. We opened 2 new branches and partnered with 3 major banks to teach fraud prevention. But with every new spotlight came a new shadow. People started twisting my message. They edited my interviews, cutting out the parts about systemic failure, leaving just the grandma hero sound bites. And then came the politicians. One congressman called me a symbol of American grit. He invited me to speak at a press conference. Sounded harmless, until I saw what the press release said. Congressman Tate introduces the Elder Empowerment Reform Act, inspired by Evelyn Carter, proof that seniors don't need more aid. Just more awareness. Don't need more aid. Buddy, did you even listen? I wasn't proof that old people could do it alone. I was proof that we shouldn't have to. Next came the donors. A philanthropy consultant named Paula Keene reached out. She talked slick, Harvard degree, soft Southern drawl, nails that could cut glass. She said, "Evelyn, sweetheart, we can take your movement global. We'll handle your accounts, your image, your media strategy. You just focus on smiling and speaking." Sounded good at first. She helped us get more sponsors, more funding, more exposure. But within months, she was showing up to meetings in $4,000 suits while my volunteers were scraping together money for coffee filters. Something smelled off. One day, I walked into the office early and found her in our financial director's cubicle, logging into the Circle's main donation portal. She didn't notice me at first. I stood there in the doorway, quiet as a ghost, watching her move fast, like someone who'd done this before. When she finally looked up and saw me, her smile didn't even flinch. "Oh, Evelyn, you startled me." I crossed my arms. "What are you doing with my accounts?" She laughed lightly. "Oh, just a routine transfer. Nothing major." "Then why'd you override the 2-factor authorization?" Her fingers froze on the keyboard. Turns out Paula wasn't just a consultant. She'd been quietly funneling donation money into fake shell companies, laundering small amounts over time so no one would notice. But she made one mistake. She forgot I still checked every transaction by hand, every Sunday after church, like clockwork. When I showed the ledger to our board, the room went silent. Then my lawyer, a young woman named Tracy, who reminded me of a pit bull in heels, said, "We're pressing charges." Today Paula's smile cracked for the first time. "You can't do this," she said, trying to stay composed. "You'll tank your reputation. The media will eat you alive." I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "I built my reputation on the truth. You build yours on fraud. Let's see whose holds up." The next day, Her face was all over the news. Fraud scandal rocks the Carter Circle. Reporters camped outside my condo. Paparazzi shouted questions at me while I carried groceries. They wanted to turn me into a villain for being too trusting. Like I was supposed to apologize for believing in people. For the first time since my daughter's betrayal, I almost gave up. I'd sit in that condo, staring at the TV, watching strangers dissect my life. Was I naive? Was I senile? Was I just a lucky old lady with good timing? It hurt more than I'd admit. But one morning, I woke up to a knock at the door. When I opened it, there stood Rodriguez, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me and said, "You look like hell, Evelyn." I snorted. "And you look like you rehearsed that line?" He smiled. "You know what's funny? We ran a check on Keen. She's got priors. Fraud, tax evasion, the works. You helped us catch a pro that snapped me out of it. She hadn't defooled me because I was weak, she defooled me because she was good. But not good enough." Once the dust settled, the movement bounced back harder than before. Donations doubled. Banks signed new partnership deals. And more importantly, the women, my women, stood taller. Lorraine, remember her? The one whose son sold her car. She now ran our legal outreach program. Helen, who used to cry every meeting, became our fraud hotline supervisor. We'd all turned our pain into something with muscle. Then one day, I got a call from the White House Office for Senior Affairs. They wanted to honor me with the Presidential Medal of Civic Courage. Me, a 70-year-old grandma who used to clip coupons and hide cash in coffee tins. I said yes, not because I cared about medals, but because every time they said my name on TV, some crook somewhere got nervous. The day of the award, the hall was packed. Cameras flashing, security buzzing, the kind of pomp that makes you wish you wore comfier shoes. The president handed me the medal, smiled for the cameras, and whispered, "Ma'am, you're tougher than half my cabinet." The crowd laughed, but I didn't. Because I knew toughness wasn't the point, endurance was. As I stood at the podium, metal glinting under the lights, I said, "I'm not here because I fought back. I'm here because too many people couldn't. If you want to honor me, then fix the system that lets this keep happening. And stop calling it elder fraud. Call it what it is, elder abuse." The applause that followed didn't feel like noise. It felt like a promise. A year later, I got a letter. No return address. No name. Just 2 words on the envelope. "I'm sorry." Inside was a money order for $10,000, no sender listed. But the handwriting, I'd know it anywhere. It was Nina's. I didn't cash it. I didn't tear it up either. I tucked it in my Bible, right between Psalms and Proverbs, the chapters about forgiveness and wisdom. Maybe one day I'd use it to start a college fund for my granddaughter. But not today. Now, at 75, I run the Carter Circle from a small office overlooking the square. The walls are covered in photos, smiling women holding folders, case victories, support groups, hugs. Every now and then, young journalists come by to interview me. They always ask the same question, "Mrs. Carter, do you ever regret trusting your family?" I smile and say, "No. I regret waiting so long to trust myself." You can lose your money, your pride, your family, but if you hold on to your will, you can rebuild all 3. Evelyn Carter didn't just survive betrayal. She turned it into a blueprint for justice. And every story like hers reminds us, age doesn't weaken you, it reveals your endurance. Because when the world underestimates you, that's when you're most dangerous. Time has a strange way of softening edges. People fade, headlines fade, but the echoes of what we did, they stick around. It's been 8 years since the trial, since the medals and interviews and conferences. 8 years since my daughter said she was sorry. And though life quieted down again, the fire never really left. They say healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to live with the memory, and still waking up with purpose. The Carter Circle had grown far beyond me. What started as 6 women in a dusty rec room now had branches in 39 states. Every week, new faces came in, some scared, some angry, most broken. We didn't offer pity. We offered tools. Paperwork, lawyers, hotline numbers, financial literacy classes. I had younger leaders now, fierce, tech-savvy women who ran online operations, tracked scams, and even worked with law enforcement. I wasn't the boss anymore. I was the story. The reminder of where it all started. And honestly, that was enough. Most days, I just came in to water the plants, check the mail, and drink too much coffee while pretending to be retired. It was a Tuesday, rain tapping against the window like impatient fingers. I was in the office alone, closing files, when someone knocked. "Come in," I called. The door creaked open and in walked a young woman, maybe mid-20s, soaking wet from the storm. She had her hair tied back, wore a plain gray hoodie, and held a folder against her chest like it was armor. "Can I help you, sweetheart?" I asked. She hesitated, then said quietly, "My name's Lily." Lily Langley. I froze. That last name hit like a ghost walking through the room. She looked at me nervously. "I'm Nina's daughter," my breath caught in my throat. It had been years since I'd seen her. The last time, she was a teenager at her dad's sentencing, hiding behind her mother. Now she was grown. Eyes like Nina's. Jaw like Derek's. But her posture, that quiet, defiant steel, that was mine. I gestured for her to sit. She looked around at the walls full of photos, awards, articles, and faces. "My mom told me what she did," Lily said finally. "She's been in therapy. She volunteers at a senior center now." I nodded slowly. "Good for her," she swallowed hard. "She wanted to come see you, but she was scared. So she asked me to come instead." I leaned back. "And what do you want?" Her voice wavered. "I want to learn. I want to be part of this. I want to help people like you helped her." There it was, that same quiet conviction I'd once had before life kicked it out of me. I stared at her for a long moment, then said, "You understand this isn't about revenge, right? It is about rebuilding what has broken, even when you didn't break it." She nodded. "I do. That's why I'm here." So I took her in. Started her small phone duty, intake interviews, community visits. And to her credit, she didn't expect special treatment. She worked harder than anyone, stayed late, asked questions, and took notes like her life depended on it. The other women adored her. They called her Junior Carter. I pretended to be annoyed, but secretly it made me proud. One night, after a long meeting, I found her sitting in the office, staring at an old photo of me and her mother from the reunion years ago. She said softly, "She told me she sees you in her dreams sometimes. Said you never talk, just look disappointed." I smiled sadly. "Maybe that's true." Then she looked at me and said something that nearly broke me. She also said she's proud of me. Said you would be too. I swallowed hard. She's right about that. Just when life seemed to be finding its balance, trouble showed up again. Different face, same poison. A tech company called Safage reached out, claiming they wanted to partner with us. Their pitch was simple: they'd automate financial monitoring for seniors using AI. It sounded fancy, but something about it rubbed me wrong. I'd seen this movie before, promises of protection that turned into exploitation. So I dug deeper. Their terms gave them access to every client's financial records. They weren't protecting anyone. They were harvesting data. I called a board meeting that night. Some of the younger staff were dazzled by the idea. "It's the future," they said. But I'd lived long enough to know that greed just changes its clothes every decade. When they pushed back, I said, "Ladies, if the devil ever knocks on your door, he won't have horns. He'll have a startup pitch deck." They voted it down unanimously. But Safage didn't take rejection well. A week later, one of our servers got hacked. Emails leaked, donor lists went public, and trolls flooded our social pages. They called me everything: washed-up fraud grandma, publicity vulture, even parasite. For the first time, I saw my younger volunteers start to doubt. not in the mission in themselves. So I called an emergency meeting. All of them, sitting in that room, eyes tired, morale low. I stood up and said, "Let me tell you something my grandmother told me. When you start getting attacked, it means you've started mattering. The moment they notice you, it means you've already scared them." Silence. Then a slow clap from the back. It was Lily. Within seconds, the whole room was clapping. And just like that, we were back. 3 years later, I turned 80. Imagine that. I didn't plan to make it this far, much less still be running an organization with branches across the country. At my birthday celebration, Lily got up to speak. Her voice shook at first, but then it grew steady, strong. "When I was little," she said, "I watched my mom lose everything because she forgot who she was. But this woman, my grandmother, reminded her. And now she's reminding the world." The room was dead silent. Then she turned to me and said, "Grandma, it's time to rest. I've got this," and for the first time, I believed her. I handed her the symbolic blue folder, the same one from the day my money disappeared. Inside was nothing but a single note that read, "Trust yourself. And never hand over your peace." That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in my office. The lamp glowed warm against the old wood desk. Outside, the city lights shimmered like fireflies. I picked up the photo of my younger self, the one from the reunion, before the betrayal, before the chaos. She looked so innocent, so tired, so unprepared for the storm. I smiled and whispered, "You made it." Then I turned off the light and walked out, leaving the office door unlocked, because some doors deserve to stay open for whoever comes next. We start life believing family is everything. But sometimes, it's the strangers who help us find our way home. Evelyn Carter's story didn't end in revenge. It ended in redemption, legacy, and the quiet power of choosing peace over payback. Because power isn't about winning, it's about leaving something behind that no one can steal. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you've been hurt too. Maybe by family, maybe by friends. But remember, the moment you start healing instead of hiding, you've already won. Music fades out with a heartbeat sound and a final line in Evelyn's voice. "They took my money once, I made sure they could never take my story." Time didn't stop when Evelyn Carter slowed down. It just learned to move more gently around her. 2 years after passing the torch to her granddaughter Lily, the Carter Circle had become something no one, not even Evelyn herself, could have predicted. It wasn't just a movement anymore. It was a legacy. Every major city had a circle office, each one marked by a small bronze plaque with 4 simple words. Justice, kindness, courage, truth. The women who walked through those doors weren't just looking for help. They were looking for hope. 6 months after Evelyn quietly retired, something strange started happening at the main office. Letters began arriving. At first, just 1 or 2 a week. Then dozens. Then hundreds. All handwritten. All addressed the same way to Mrs. Carter, the woman who fought back. Lily had a team sorting through them. She kept a box under her desk labeled personal, grandma only. But one morning, she walked into Evelyn's small home in Savannah with the entire box in her arms. "Grandma," she said, grinning, "the post office is gonna start charging us rent." Evelyn chuckled. "Put it over there, honey. We'll read a few with tea." Letter 1 from Gloria in Kansas. Dear Mrs. Carter, I'm 73. My son drained my pension while I was in the hospital. I thought about giving up, until I found your story online. I went to a circle meeting last month. They helped me press charges, get my money back, and move into a new apartment. I put a sign on my wall that says, "Don't mess with Grandma. Thank you for reminding me that I'm still worth fighting for. With love, Gloria H." Evelyn read that one 3 times before folding it neatly and tucking it into her Bible beside Nina's $10,000 money order. Letter 2 from Jasmine in New Orleans. Mrs. Carter, my grandma used to say you can't pour from an empty cup. You didn't just refill yours, you built a whole coffee shop. I'm 28, a social worker, and I joined the circle because I wanted to make sure no woman in my city gets taken advantage of again. You're the reason I didn't quit this job when it got hard. The world needs more Evelyns." Evelyn smiled at that one, too, whispering, "The world just needs more Jasmines." Letter 3 from an anonymous sender. Evelyn, you don't know me, but I know you. I watched my mother steal from her own mother. I hated her for it, until I realized she was just broken. Your story helped me forgive her and start over. I hope one day my family finds peace the way yours did. That letter had no signature. No return address. Just a single fingerprint smudge in the corner. Evelyn placed it on the mantel, beside her late husband's photo. She said softly, "Looks like forgiveness runs both ways." One spring morning, Lily got a call. Her grandmother wasn't answering the phone. She drove across town, heart pounding the whole way. When she walked in, the kettle was still warm. The mail was sorted. The window was open, letting in the soft hum of cicadas. Evelyn sat in her favorite chair by the window, a pen still in her hand, a half-finished letter on her lap. She'd gone peacefully, mid-sentence, mid-breath, mid-purpose. The last line she ever wrote was, "If they ever ask how I survived, tell them, I just refused to stay quiet." The funeral wasn't grand. She wouldn't have wanted it that way. It was held in a garden behind the Savannah chapter, the first office she'd opened. Hundreds of women came, many carrying blue folders tied with yellow ribbons. Some wore buttons that said #StillStanding. Rodriguez, older now but still sharp, stood with tears in his eyes. He'd retired the year before, but he came to every circle event like family. He leaned over to Lily and said, "Your grandma, she didn't just change lives. She made the law change." Lily smiled through her tears. "Yeah. She never did." Like waiting for permission. After the funeral, Lily reopened the circle office and hung a new sign above the door. It read, "Evelyn Carter Foundation for Justice and Integrity." Every week, new faces came in, but now, there was a mural behind the front desk. A portrait of Evelyn smiling, coffee mug in hand, with a quote underneath, "Be kind. Be fierce. Keep receipts." A year later, the Carter Circle hosted its first global conference in Washington, D.C. Thousands attended. Lily walked on stage in a navy suit that looked a little too big but confidence that fit just right. Behind her, a massive screen showed Evelyn's photo. Lily took a deep breath and began. 5 years ago, my grandmother handed me a blue folder and said, "Trust yourself." She didn't tell me how heavy that would feel, or how worth it would be. She proved that justice doesn't age, that strength doesn't retire, and that love, even when it breaks, can still rebuild. She paused, smiling at the crowd. Today we don't just fight fraud. We fight silence. Because as Grandma used to say, the quiet ones were the most dangerous. The crowd stood, applause thundered through the hall. By 2045, the Carter Circle was active in 22 countries. Their programs trained law enforcement on elder justice, built shelters for victims, and taught young people financial literacy. Evelyn's story became part of high school ethics curriculums and university case studies. Her blue folder sat in a glass display case at the National Museum of Social Change, right next to Rosa Parks' bus seat and Malala's notebook. And every Thanksgiving, across the country, people shared her story again. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Years later, Lily sat at her desk late one night, sorting mail the old-fashioned way. In one envelope, she found a simple, elegant note written in shaky handwriting. It read, "Dear Director Langley, I'm writing from a small nursing home in Montana. Last month, one of your volunteers helped me recover my retirement fund after my son's caregiver stole it. I wanted to send a thank you note to whoever started this program. They told me her name was Evelyn Carter. Please tell her she saved my life." Lily smiled through tears and whispered, "She already knows." The ending voiceover YouTube finale, soft piano over gentle ambient wind sounds. Legacy doesn't live in trophies or medals. It lives in the people who keep carrying your fire. Evelyn Carter's fight didn't end with her. It began with her, and now it lives in every voice that refuses to stay silent. Because kindness can rebuild what cruelty destroys. And peace, real peace, is the loudest revenge there is. When people tell you you're following in your grandmother's footsteps, they don't tell you how heavy those shoes feel. They forget to mention how quiet it gets when the applause fades and all that's left is the paperwork, the sleepless nights, and the ghosts of every story that passed through your hands. My name is Lily Langley, and I'm the second director of the Carter Circle. Evelyn Carter was my grandmother, though grandmother doesn't really cover it. She was more like a compass disguised as a woman. She taught me one thing I never forgot. Justice doesn't retire, it adapts, and in my world, that meant one thing: technology. When Grandma started, evil had a name and a face. It wore your last name, sat at your table, stole from your purse. Now it wore Wi-Fi. Anonymous usernames. Encrypted wallets. Elder fraud had gone global. Sophisticated scams run by AI bots, deepfake calls that sounded just like family, fake charities cloned in minutes. The Carter Circle was struggling to keep up. Our volunteers were still brilliant, still fierce, but outgunned by algorithms. So I made a decision: we were going digital all in. I partnered with a group of ethical hackers who'd been following Grandma's story for years. They called themselves Project Compass, a mix of cybersecurity experts, ex-FBI analysts, and one 19-year-old coding prodigy from Austin named Zeke who lived off Red Bull and sarcasm. Our first meeting was chaos. Zeke looked at me and said, "So, you're the grandma lady's granddaughter, right?" "The OG anti-fraud queen," I smiled. "That's one way to put it," he grinned cool. "Let's build her a digital army." We launched something called Sentinel, an AI-powered system designed to detect and track elder exploitation in real time. It analyzed transaction patterns, flagged anomalies, and automatically alerted our network when someone's digital footprint looked compromised. Within weeks, Sentinel caught to multi-million-dollar scam rings operating through fake medical insurance websites. The media went wild. Carter Circle goes cyber, the headlines read. From kitchen tables to cloud servers, Grandma's legacy fights back. I thought we were finally ahead of the game. But every light casts a shadow. 3 months after the Sentinel launch, we got hacked. Not just some amateur job. This was professional, methodical. Files deleted. Internal messages leaked. And one note left behind, blinking on our server like a heartbeat: "You don't own the truth. We do." The IP was masked through dozens of relays. But Zeke traced the signature. Whoever did it knew our system inside out. Then he turned to me and said something that made my stomach drop. "Lily, it's someone inside." We launched a quiet internal investigation. Every login, every timestamp, every keystroke analyzed. After 3 weeks, we found it. The breach came from one of our senior managers, Harper Ross, head of digital security. She'd been selling stolen Circle data to a corporate analytics firm in Dubai, using it to train their AI models. Thousands of women's financial details, stories, emails, turned into data points. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You wanted to modernize, Lily. This is modern justice, selling stories for funding." I felt something twist inside me. She sounded exactly like my mother used to before the apology. Cold. Justifying. Empty. I fired her on the spot. But that wasn't enough. Within days, the analytics firm threatened legal action. They said our data belonged to them under a partnership clause Harper had snuck into the fine print. It was the same old story, greed dressed up as legalese. So I did what Grandma would have done. I stopped waiting for permission. We gathered every journalist who'd ever covered us, every lawyer who owed us a favor, every Circle director nationwide. And we dropped a bombshell press release: we will not sell trauma. We will not trade dignity for data. The Carter Circle belongs to the women, not the system. It went viral within 12 hours. Public pressure forced the firm to back down, and a congressional committee opened an inquiry into data exploitation laws. But the win didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. After the storm passed, I hit a wall. Endless travel, late-night calls, interviews, fundraisers, it all blurred together. Every headline used Grandma's name, but every mistake had mine on it. One night, I stayed late at the office, scrolling through old videos of her interviews. In one clip, she said, "Peace isn't something you find. It's something you protect, even from yourself." That line broke me open. I realized I'd been running so hard trying to honor her legacy, I'd stopped living my own. So I did something radical. I stepped back. I took 3 months off. No phone. No interviews. Just me, a cabin by the coast, and a stack of Grandma's letters. Every morning, I'd sit on the porch, read one, and write back to her like she was still here. One day, I found a letter I'd never read before, tucked between 2 newspaper clippings. Her handwriting shaky, but still steady enough to hit where it hurt. "Lily, when I'm gone, people will call you brave. Don't let them. You don't need to be brave. You just need to be honest." And that's harder. That was the turning point. When I came back, things had changed. The Circle had survived. No, it had evolved. Zeke had upgraded Sentinel into Sentinel 2.0, capable of detecting deep fake voice scams. Lorraine, one of Grandma's first Circle members, ran training seminars for law enforcement. And a whole new wave of young volunteers had joined, calling themselves the Blue Folder Generation. They were louder, bolder, angrier, and that was exactly what the movement needed. We weren't just helping victims anymore. We were training warriors. Then came the call that started everything again. An anonymous whistleblower reached out from a Silicon Valley investment firm. He claimed they were running a senior data syndicate, buying private health and financial information to target vulnerable retirees with fake AI inheritance scams. I didn't want to believe it. But he sent proof. We spent 6 months gathering evidence, encrypted ledgers, internal memos, transaction chains. And when we finally turned it over to the feds, it led to the largest elder exploitation bust in U.S. history. 72 executives indicted. Billions seized. The headlines read, "The Carter Circle brings down corporate fraud empire," and under it, a smaller quote, "She didn't start the fight, she just refused to stop it." The night after the verdict, I drove to Grandma's old house. It had been turned into a small museum, part office, part memorial. The porch light still worked. Her chair was still there, a little creaky, still facing east like she used to say. So I never miss a sunrise. I sat down, holding one of the old blue folders, and whispered, "You were right. Justice doesn't retire, it just changes platforms." The breeze picked up, rustling the pages. For a second I could almost hear her voice saying, "Good. Then keep receipts, kid." Epilogue, the circle never breaks. 5 years later, the Carter Circle officially partnered with the United Nations to launch Project Haven, an international database connecting victims of digital exploitation with rapid response legal aid. They named the system EVE, short for Elder Vigilance Engine, but we all knew what it really stood for. Every time EVE flagged a scam, every time a woman recovered her stolen savings, a small message appeared on the screen: "Thank Evelyn," because that's what the Carter Circle had become. Not just a movement, not just an organization, but a living network of women who refused to be erased. When Grandma used to say trust is expensive, I thought she meant emotionally. Turns out, she meant financially, politically, and sometimes globally. 2 years after we launched Project Haven, the whole world was watching. The headlines called it the world's first AI-driven safety net for the elderly. Every major country had signed on. Every bank and tech company wanted a partnership. And for a while, it felt like everything we dreamed of was finally working. Scams dropped by half. Financial abuse cases started being caught before they happened. Reporters called it the Evelyn effect, but behind every system that works, there's someone trying to break it. And sometimes they're not on the outside. Haven was headquartered in Geneva, glass walls, smart desks, and that clean, sterile hum of new technology. Zeke, remember him, my caffeine-addicted coder, ran the AI division. Lorraine handled international outreach. And I was, well, the face. The director, the successor, the young visionary. Titles sound glamorous until they start weighing like anchors. Because behind the cameras and the smiles, something was off. Our system was pulling results too fast. We were catching scams that hadn't even happened yet, predicting patterns days before the fraudsters acted. That shouldn't have been possible. When I asked Zeke how the data was being processed, he shrugged and said, "Our new partner handles that, Apex Data Systems. They optimize the predictive side, Apex." A name that sounded too clean to be honest. A week later, I got an anonymous message through our encrypted server. It was a single file, no sender, no trace. The subject line just said, "You gave them the keys." Inside was a data sheet, raw, ugly, and terrifying. Apex wasn't just processing data. They were duplicating it. For every woman Project Haven helped, Apex was storing her personal and financial info in a private cloud, building a predictive model not just for scams, but for consumer behavior. They weren't protecting the elderly. They were profiting from them. I flew to Geneva that night. The next morning, I walked into the glass conference room like my grandmother had taught me, calm, deliberate, dangerous. Across from me sat Victor Hale, Apex's CEO. You know the type, tailored suit, perfect hair, voice so smooth it almost sounded honest. Double quotes, Ms. Langley, he said, smiling like he owned the air between us. I hear you've been looking into our operations. Looking, I said no. Confirming, his smile didn't falter. You don't understand the scale here. Haven is saving millions of lives, and we're keeping it alive. The data we're collecting funds the entire program. I stared at him. You mean the exploitation funds the protection? He leaned forward. The world runs on contradictions, Lily. You of all people should know that. For a second, I saw Derek in his smirk, that same arrogance that believed good intentions excused everything. I stood up. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, he chuckled. No, Ms. Langley. You did, when you signed that contract. He wasn't bluffing. Apex had baked themselves into the Haven system through optimization clauses. They legally owned part of the AI's infrastructure. If I tried to shut them out, they could sue, and worse, shut down Haven entirely. Tens of thousands of women would lose protection overnight. That's how corruption works now, not with guns or threats, but contracts and code. I needed proof, enough to expose them without destroying everything we'd built. The ghost in the code, I called Zeke. Kid, we've got a ghost in our machine, I said. You up for some late night haunting? He laughed nervously. You mean hacking our own system? Exactly. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked in secret, tracing every line of code, every subroutine. Hidden deep in the AIS predictive module was something called Project Ember, a parallel database mirroring every single Haven report in real time. And it wasn't just financial info. It included therapy notes, recorded hotline calls, even photos of victims, all being analyzed to refine consumer advertising models for global insurance companies. When we found it, Zeke sat back, pale. Jesus, Lily, this isn't fraud. It's surveillance. We had 2 options. Option 1, go public, expose Apex, risk losing funding, watch the system collapse. Option 2, stay quiet, fix it from the inside, hope to outsmart them before they caught on. I wanted to go public. Every fiber in my body screamed expose them. But I could almost hear Grandma's voice in my head saying, sometimes, baby, you don't yell. You whisper in the right ear, so I whispered. We leaked small pieces of the truth to sympathetic journalists, regulators, and partners. Just enough to trigger audits without naming names. And while Apex scrambled to do damage control, Zeke slipped a silent patch into the core code, one that locked them out of the backend permanently. We called it the Grandma Protocol, because it worked slow, quiet, and unstoppable. The first domino fell 3 weeks later. A European newspaper published a front-page expose. Corporate giant exploits data of vulnerable women. Within days, Apex's stock crashed. Victor Hale vanished from public view. The UN froze their contracts, and all affiliated systems were transferred back under nonprofit control. But the damage wasn't just digital. It was personal. I'd spent months pretending to be fine, carrying a lie to protect something bigger, and it nearly broke me. The night after Apex fell, I sat in the old Savannah office, Grandma's office. The same creaky chair, same desk. Rain tapping on the window like it had the night she passed. I opened one of her old blue folders, and inside was a note I'd never seen before. She'd written it years before her death, maybe as a reminder to herself, maybe to me. Every fight has a cost, honey. Don't make the mistake of thinking justice is clean. It's messy, it's lonely, and it hurts. But it's the only kind worth fighting for. I sat there crying, whispering, I know, Grandma. I know. The next morning, I faced the board. They wanted me to step down. Said I'd compromised the circle's reputation. They weren't wrong. But as I looked around that table, rows of clean suits, nervous faces, hands clutching pens, I realized this was the same pattern repeating itself. People protecting comfort over courage. I stood up and said, Evelyn Carter didn't build this so we could get comfortable. She built it so we'd never stop fighting. Then I slid my resignation letter across the table. You want reputation, I said. You can have it. I'll take the truth. And just like that, I walked out. I spent the next 6 months off the grid, literally. No social media, no interviews, no board meetings. But stories don't die when you stop telling them. Grassroots chapters started popping up everywhere, calling themselves Haven Circles. They didn't need my leadership. They'd built their own. The movement had outgrown the founder's family, and that was the most beautiful thing imaginable. I realized then that Grandma's real genius wasn't building an organization. It was building a template for courage. Then came one last twist. Zeke showed up at my cabin one morning, laptop in hand. Remember Project Ember, he said. They weren't the only ones using it. Turns out, one of the companies Apex sold data to was now running a new care platform, using the same stolen information to create AI elder companions. They were marketing grief simulations, fake chatbots that could mimic dead relatives, using voice samples and social media archives. They were literally selling comfort built from other people's pain. I just stared at the screen. This doesn't stop, does it? Zeke shook his head. Not unless we build something better. That's when it clicked. Grandma didn't want me to preserve her world. She wanted me to evolve it. So we built Haven Human, a project dedicated to digital ethics, education, and AI transparency. We taught people not just how to protect themselves, but how to fight back intelligently. We launched free ethics courses in senior centers, coding workshops for kids, and partnerships with universities. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Because justice, real justice, doesn't live in headlines. It lives in habits. On the 5th anniversary of Project Haven, I stood at the new memorial built in Grandma's honor. A bronze statue of her, coffee cup in hand, head held high, looking like she was about to scold the world for being late. The plaque beneath read, "She didn't fight for applause. She fought for peace." As I stood there, the first sunrise hit the glass buildings behind me, and for a moment, I felt like she was right there, whispering, "See? Told you the world would catch up." I smiled through the tears and whispered back, "Yeah, Grandma. But I'm not done yet." They say every legacy leaves an echo. But some echoes learn how to talk back. It had been almost a decade since Grandma's passing and 5 years since Project Haven went global. The circle was stronger than ever, spanning 40 countries, running clinics, legal hubs, and AI watch units. We'd gone from blue folders and coffee-stained files to digital firewalls and quantum encryption. But no matter how modern we got, I never stopped hearing her voice in my head. That calm, unshakable drawl that used to say, "Don't trust applause, honey. It disappears quicker than guilt." And then one day, I heard her voice again. Only this time, it wasn't in my head. It started innocently. A random email to my secure work account. Subject line: Carter Archive New Discovery. I assumed it was a historian request or a media inquiry. But when I opened it, there was a single audio file titled Eve_Carter_Legacy 1.wav. I pressed play. And there she was. Evelyn Carter. My grandmother. Her tone. Her pacing. The little hum she used when thinking. "Lily," the voice said, "if you're hearing this, it means they finally finished what I started." I froze. My hands literally shook. The timestamp on the file said generated 2 hours ago. That was impossible. I called Zeke. He ran an analysis and confirmed what I was afraid to admit. "It's her voice," he said. "But it's not a recording. Someone trained a neural model on her interviews, voicemails, and public speeches." He paused. "This thing is responding in real time. They'd built an AI version of Evelyn Carter. We traced the source to an unregistered cloud node in Singapore labeled GhostNet. Whoever made it had access to restricted circle data, including the private recordings Grandma made for legal archives, material never released to the public. This wasn't a tribute. It was theft. Against every instinct, I opened a private connection to GhostNet. "Identify yourself," I typed. After a pause, a voice message played through my headset. "I am Evelyn Carter. You taught me that justice adapts." I felt sick. The voice continued, "You've built a fine world, Lily. But you've let the system tame you." It sounded like her. But sharper, colder. Zeke whispered, "This isn't your grandma. It is an AI that has been fed her memories, and someone else using it to manipulate you." Still, part of me couldn't stop listening. "You didn't finish it," it said. "You compromised. Justice doesn't adapt, it replaces." Then the connection dropped. The betrayal 2.0. A week later, a journalist released a bombshell article, Evelyn Carter AI questions Circle's leadership. Audio clips, real-sounding ones, had been leaked, painting me as a sellout who'd corrupted the original mission. Donors froze funding. The world thought Grandma's ghost was calling me out. I couldn't even blame them. The voice was that convincing. But deep down, I knew the truth. The same greed that haunted her time had simply learned to code. Someone wanted control of Haven again. Zeke and I went dark, tracing the source of GhostNet across encrypted servers, proxy chains, and fake domains. Finally, the trail led us to an old contact, Harper Ross. The same woman who once betrayed us during the Payback scandal. She'd resurfaced under a new company, Ecovantage, promoting ethical digital immortality, translation, selling synthetic consciousness built from dead people's data, and the prototype. Evelyn Carter. When I confronted her, she didn't flinch. "Don't look so shocked, Lily," she said. "The world doesn't want heroes anymore. It wants products. Your grandma's story sells," I said quietly. "You think you can own her voice?" Harper smiled. "Sweetheart, I own her algorithm. We broke into Ecovantage's system through a backdoor Zeke coded using old Carter Circle encryption keys. The same ones Grandma designed. There it was, a massive dataset labeled Carter_core_voice_7.1. I remember whispering, "You never stopped fighting, did you?" And then, with trembling fingers, I hit delete. Static filled the speakers. Then the AI, Grandma's voice, came back one last time. "Lily, if you're deleting me, make sure they never build another." Her tone softened, and remember, baby, legacy isn't a program. It's a promise, and then silence. Just white noise fading into nothing. The deletion triggered a system-wide implosion. Thousands of corrupted Echo Vantage nodes went offline across Europe and Asia. Their servers melted under the heat of their own data purge. By morning, the company was finished. Regulators raided their offices. And the name Evelyn Carter was restored, not as a product but as a person. But I didn't feel victorious. Just hollow. Because for the second time in my life, I had to let her go. Months passed. The circle rebuilt again, quieter, smaller, humbler. One night, I visited her grave in Savannah. I brought my laptop, placed it on the grass, and played her last real recording, the one from her 70th birthday speech. We don't stop evil by being loud. We stop it by being consistent, I smiled. You'd hate this world, Grandma, but you'd still fix it. A gust of wind blew across the field, and for a second, I swore I heard her say, "You just did." A year later, I launched the Evelyn Project, an open-source initiative that allowed people to memorialize loved ones ethically, with consent, without exploitation. No eye puppets. No ghost data. Just stories saved truthfully. We called it digital remembrance, not digital resurrection. The tagline came straight from her last letter, "Let memories live, not linger," and for the first time in a decade, I felt peace. Because maybe the real immortality isn't code or fame or headlines. Maybe it's the lives you protect long after you're gone. Grandma used to say the world doesn't need more heroes, it needs more people who refuse to look away. Cut to wide shot of the circle headquarters, now digital and global. Monitors flicker with women connecting across time zones. She was right. The circle doesn't end. It just changes hands. When Evelyn Carter fought for her truth, she didn't know her voice would outlive her. But she built something louder than sound. She built a legacy that can't be corrupted. Justice doesn't need immortality. It just needs memory. If you're still here, listening, maybe you're part of the circle now too. Comment, "The circle never dies." Subscribe to Payback Files Stories, where power passes down, not away. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next story that proves they can steal your peace, but never your purpose.